Stepdaughter called me a gold digger, but her dad's broke. I'm the one paying for her wedding. All right, so let me break this down for you. I, 38F, have been married to my husband, Rick, 52M, for about 4 years now. His late wife passed away about a year before we met, and we dated for 2 years before we tied the knot. So, yeah, not a super long time, but long enough to know what I signed up for. Rick's got 2 kids from his first marriage, Jess, 28F, and Blake, 26M. Now, just to clear things up, I don't call them my stepkids, because they made it real clear from day one that I wasn't their stepmom, just their dad's new wife. Fine by me, honestly. It's not like I was trying to replace their mom or anything. They're adults. They don't need a new parent. But let me tell you, things have never been easy between us. From the beginning, it was just cold. Like, no matter what I did, there was this wall between us. I tried to be polite, tried to be generous when I could, but it's like they already decided they didn't like me before I even got a chance. I get it, kind of. I went through my parents' divorce as a kid, and I remember feeling weird when my dad started seeing someone new. But this felt different. It's like they saw me as some outsider trying to take something from them. Not that I ever was, but that's how they acted. Anyway, we mostly kept things civil, though. I wasn't going to force anything, and neither were they. We all just kind of existed in this weird space where we acknowledged each other, but never really bonded. It was like living with roommates who didn't really talk to you, but you had to pretend everything was fine for the sake of the person in the middle, Rick. So fast forward a bit, and Jess gets engaged. Rick and I were excited for her, or at least I was trying to be. It's kind of hard to be genuinely pumped for someone who clearly doesn't like you, but I was doing my best. I figured this might be a chance for all of us to get a little closer. Maybe, I don't know, find some common ground in all the wedding stuff. I was wrong. So wrong. A few weeks after Jess's engagement, she and Blake came over to our house. Nothing fancy, just a casual visit. We're all sitting in the living room chatting about our wedding plans, and then it happens. The money talk. It always happens, doesn't it? Rick had been pretty quiet during most of the conversation, but when Jess asked about what he could contribute, he perked up a bit. He told her that he could put in about $10,000 towards the wedding. Now, to me, that sounded pretty damn generous, considering everything. But Jess's face? Oh man, it was like someone had told her she was getting socks for Christmas. Total disappointment. She didn't say anything right away, but you could see the gears turning in her head. I didn't say anything either, because, well, I didn't want to make things worse. Blake just sat there like a statue, not getting involved as usual. Classic Blake. Jess finally spoke up, asking, "Is that it? I was hoping for a bit more." Rick kind of looked uncomfortable, but he stayed calm and explained, "Jess, I'd love to give you more, but that's what I can manage right now. I should probably explain why $10K is already more than enough. See, before Rick's wife passed, they went through hell with medical bills. Cancer treatments, hospital stays, and everything else drained every penny they had. Rick had to cash out his retirement, sell some investments, and even take out a second mortgage on his house just to cover it all. He basically sacrificed his entire financial future to take care of his wife in her final years. And after she passed, it left him in a tough spot. Not to mention, he quit his higher-paying job for something that gave him more flexibility. But it didn't pay nearly as much. So that $10K? Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. Anyway, after Rick explains himself, Jess doesn't look any happier. She presses him a bit more, but he stands firm. $10K is what he can give, and that's it. She sighs, clearly not happy. And then Rick says he's going to run out for a bit to grab something from the store. So it's just me, Jess, and Blake sitting in awkward silence. That's when Jess turns to me and says, "So, are you going to pitch in any more for the wedding? I mean, you're married to my dad now, right?" The way she said it, I can't even explain it. It wasn't just a question. It was like she was daring me to say no. Like she already had some nasty assumption about me and was waiting for confirmation. I didn't want to get into a whole thing with her, so I just told her, "Rick and I talked about it, and $10K is what we agreed on. That's what we can give together." Jess rolled her eyes and said, "I should have known. You're just here for what he has, not what you can give." I can't even begin to describe how pissed off that made me. Like, seriously? I've been putting up with her coldness for years, and now she has the nerve to accuse me of marrying her dad for money? I don't know what came over me, but I snapped. "Excuse me?" I said, trying not to raise my voice. "Who do you think has been paying off that second mortgage your dad took out? Who do you think is keeping this house afloat?" She looked confused for a second, but I wasn't done. "Your dad lost most of his savings taking care of your mom, and ever since we got married, I've been covering 70% of the bills. So no, I'm not a gold digger. I make more than your dad, and I've been the one helping him get back on his feet." Jess didn't even know what to say. She just kind of stared at me, probably trying to figure out if I was serious. Then, without another word, she stands up, calls me stuck up, and storms out of the house. Blake, like usual, stayed quiet, then awkwardly followed her out, not saying a single word. And that was that. Jess left, pissed off, and now I'm sitting here wondering if I went too far. But honestly, what was I supposed to do? Just sit there and let her call me a gold digger? I know things are probably going to get even messier now, but I'm done pretending like I don't exist in this family. If they want to think the worst of me, fine, but they should at least know the truth first. Alright, so here's where things start to get messy. After Jess stormed out and Blake followed her, I was left sitting there in total disbelief. Like, did that really just happen? I knew things weren't exactly warm and fuzzy between me and Rick's kids, but for Jess to straight up accuse me of being with her dad for his money, that was a new low, even for her. I sat there for a few minutes, just replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out if there was something I said or did that could have triggered her to act like that. Spoiler, there wasn't. So Rick gets home not too long after, and of course, the first thing he notices is that Jess and Blake are gone. I wasn't exactly ready to tell him about the whole fight just yet, so I brushed it off with something like, "Oh, they had to go." Rick didn't really push for details, which I was thankful for at that moment because I wasn't ready to get into it right away, but I knew I couldn't keep it from him forever. The next day, I get a text from Jess. It was one of those passive-aggressive, "I need to talk to my dad without you around" type messages, and honestly, it took everything in me not to respond with some smart comment. Instead, I told Rick that Jess wanted to talk to him, and he, being the good dad that he is, said he'd reach out and see what's going on. Later that evening, Rick gives her a call, and I'm just sitting in the other room pretending not to listen while also absolutely listening to every word. I couldn't hear what Jess was saying on her end, but from Rick's responses, I could tell she was definitely twisting the story. At one point, Rick says, "She said what?" And I could feel my stomach drop. Jess had clearly taken what I said about me helping out financially and twisted it into some wild accusation about me blaming her mom's illness for her not getting a better wedding budget. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that I felt like my head was about to explode from frustration. Rick hung up the phone, and I knew I had to come clean about the fight before Jess's version of events took over. So I sit him down and walk him through exactly what happened, how Jess accused me of being a gold digger, how I lost my temper and told her the truth about who's really been paying the bills, and how she stormed out after calling me stuck up. To my surprise, Rick wasn't mad. Well, not at me at least. He was pissed at Jess for what she said and how she handled the whole thing, but I could tell he was also uncomfortable with the fact that I had shared details about his financial situation with his kids. And I get it, I really do. I probably shouldn't have said anything in the heat of the moment, but what was I supposed to do? Just let her keep throwing those nasty accusations at me? Rick, being the calm and level-headed guy he is, said he'd talked to Jess and Blake, but he also gently told me that he didn't want his kids knowing all the details about his finances. He's always been pretty private about money, and I can respect that. But at the same time, I felt like they needed to know the truth, especially if they were going to sit there and act like I'm just mooching off their dad. Anyway, a few days go by, and I don't hear anything from Jess or Blake. It was kind of a relief, to be honest. The tension in the house had been sky high since the whole argument, and I was just trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. Rick and I went about our routine and things were fine between us, but I could tell he was still bothered by the situation with his kids. He wasn't saying much about it, but I could see it weighing on him. And of course, I felt guilty for putting him in that position, even though I knew I was only defending myself. Then, one afternoon, Rick gets another call from Jess. This time, she doesn't even wait for him to reach out first. She just calls out of nowhere. Again, I'm sitting in the other room, pretending not to listen while very much listening. And once again, I hear Rick saying stuff like, "That's not what she said," and "You need to stop twisting things." After the call, Rick came to me, clearly frustrated. Apparently, Jess had convinced herself that I somehow blamed her mom's illness for the fact that her wedding budget wasn't bigger. It's like she took one part of what I said, about how Rick had drained his savings during her mom's illness, and twisted it into me saying her mom's death was the reason for everything. I mean, who even thinks like that? Rick assured me that he told Jess she was overreacting and that I didn't say anything like that, but he also asked me to be a little more careful with what I say around his kids. He wasn't mad at me, but I could tell he didn't want things to escalate any further. At this point, I was just done. Done with the drama, done with the accusations, and done with trying to make things right with Jess and Blake. If they were going to keep coming at me like this, then I didn't see the point in bending over backward to make them like me. I wasn't the enemy here. I'd been nothing but supportive of Rick, and they were acting like I was some kind of villain in their story. It was exhausting. But of course, things didn't end there. They never do, right? A few days later, Rick comes to me and says that Jess is still upset and that she's now telling people I'm trying to take over the family finances. I swear, it was like every time we thought we were done with this mess, something new would pop up. I wasn't even sure how to react at this point. I mean, how do you respond when someone's just determined to see you as the bad guy, no matter what you do? Rick, to his credit, defended me again. He told Jess that I wasn't trying to take over anything, and that I'd actually been the one helping him rebuild after everything that happened. But I could tell it was starting to wear on him too. No one wants to be stuck in the middle between their wife and their kids, and I felt bad for Rick, but I also didn't know what else to do. At this point, it felt like a lose-lose situation. I wasn't about to back down and let Jess continue thinking I was some gold digger, but I also didn't want to keep putting Rick in this uncomfortable spot. It was like no matter what I did, things were only going to get worse. So yeah, that's where we were. Me, stuck in this weird battle with my husband's kids, trying to navigate this mess without making things worse for Rick. It wasn't exactly what I had imagined when I married him, but here we were. So, after the whole mess with Jess and her ridiculous accusations, I thought things might cool down for a bit, but nope, it got worse. And when I say worse, I mean the kind of worse where you just want to throw your hands up and be like, what did I do to deserve this? But of course, I had to keep my cool, because if I didn't, I'd be the bad guy again. So here's how it goes down. A few days after Rick tells me that Jess is still running her mouth about me, I get a text from Blake. Now, Blake's always been the quieter one between him and Jess, so I wasn't really expecting much from him. But this text? It was long and full of a lot of passive-aggressive nonsense. He basically said something like, I don't want to get involved, but I think you've been out of line with my sister. Out of line? Really? He didn't even mention the fact that Jess was the one who came at me, calling me a gold digger. Instead, he's just parroting her version of events, saying I should have never brought up money or air their dad's financial struggles. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the wedding budget or me being out of line. This was about control. Jess and Blake had always been used to their dad handling things their way. They'd never had to face the reality of how much Rick had sacrificed for them and their mom. And now that I was in the picture, and the truth was starting to come out, they didn't like it one bit. I was furious, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised. I knew Rick had shielded them from a lot over the years. He never wanted them to feel burdened by his struggles. But come on, at some point, they needed to grow up and face the facts. The world doesn't revolve around them and their wedding plans. So, I showed Rick the text from Blake. I expected him to be upset, maybe even confront Blake about it. But instead, he just sighed and said, they'll come around. And I just stood there, trying to figure out how he could be so calm about all of this when I was boiling inside. Like, sure, they're his kids, but at what point do you say enough is enough? Rick, being the ever-patient dad, decided he'd talk to them both. He sat down with Jess and Blake separately, trying to explain to them that I wasn't some gold digger, that I was actually the one who had been supporting the household financially, and that they needed to stop making me the bad guy. But instead of owning up to their behavior, Jess doubled down, saying something along the lines of, it's not about the money, it's about her attitude. Her attitude? Right, because the only thing I ever did wrong was stand up for myself when she insulted me. Blake wasn't any better. He said he didn't want to take sides, but it was clear whose side he was already on. He didn't care about the truth. He just wanted everything to go back to the way it was before I came into the picture. You know, where they had their dad all to themselves and no one was calling them out on their selfishness. After Rick's attempts to smooth things over failed miserably, I decided I was done playing nice. I wasn't going to let them keep dragging my name through the mud without defending myself. So the next time Jess came over, which was, by the way, to talk more about her wedding budget, I sat her down for a real conversation. Look, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage, I'm not here to fight with you, but you need to understand something. Your dad gave you $10K because that's what he can afford. He's not some secret millionaire hiding piles of cash. He's been working his butt off to rebuild after everything that happened with your mom. She just crossed her arms and looked at me like I was speaking another language. I don't care about the money, she said. I care about how you're treating my dad. That was it. That was the moment I realized Jess wasn't going to listen to a word I said. She wasn't even open to hearing the truth about anything. It was all about her perception, and nothing I said would change that. So I laid it out for her. I told her how I'd been the one paying the majority of the bills since Rick and I got married. How I wasn't some trophy wife living off her dad's money. I wasn't even doing it to make her feel guilty. I just wanted her to understand the reality of the situation. But of course, she didn't. Instead, she got even more defensive, saying, "It's not your place to tell me how my dad's been handling his money." And yeah, maybe she had a point. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. But I was sick of being painted as the villain in this story. When she finally left, I felt like I'd just gone 10 rounds in a boxing match. And to make it worse, Rick wasn't exactly thrilled with how things went down either. He understood where I was coming from, but he still didn't like that I'd confronted Jess so directly. He kept saying things like, "They'll come around eventually." But I wasn't buying it. How many times do you have to let someone disrespect you before you stand up for yourself? The next few days were pretty tense. Rick tried to keep the peace, but it was clear that things were far from okay. Jess and Blake were still talking behind my back, and Rick was still caught in the middle, trying to make everyone happy. It was like we were all just waiting for the next explosion. And then, right when I thought things couldn't get more ridiculous, Jess called Rick again. This time, she wasn't just upset about the money or my attitude. She'd apparently started telling people that I was trying to take control of Rick's finances, like I had some grand plan to manipulate him and take over his life. It was complete nonsense, but the fact that she was spreading these rumors was enough to make my blood boil. Rick, to his credit, shut it down immediately. He told Jess that what she was saying was completely untrue and that she needed to stop spreading lies, but the damage was already done. Jess had planted this seed of doubt, and now it felt like there was this unspoken tension between Rick and me, even though he said he believed me. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I was tired of defending myself, tired of trying to make peace with people who clearly didn't want anything to do with me. But the worst part? I felt like Rick was starting to get worn down by it all. He wasn't saying it outright, but I could see it in the way he avoided the topic. He didn't want to deal with it anymore, and honestly, neither did I. But something had to give. I just wasn't sure what. Update 1. So, after all the drama with Jess spreading lies and Blake sitting on the sidelines acting like Switzerland, I thought things were as bad as they could get. But of course they weren't. I guess I should have expected it by now. Whenever you think things can't get more complicated, they do. A few days after the last blow-up, Rick comes home looking more stressed than I've ever seen him. He didn't say anything at first, just kind of went about his business like he was trying to figure out how to start. I could tell something was bothering him, so I asked what was going on. Turns out, Jess had taken things up another level. She had gone and told their extended family, Rick's siblings, his parents, even some cousins, that I was trying to take over his finances and basically run his life. She'd spun this whole story about how I was controlling, manipulative, and how Rick wasn't really himself anymore since we got married. I mean, really? At this point, I wasn't even mad anymore. I was just exhausted. How many times can someone throw nonsense at you before it just starts to sound like white noise? But the problem was, it wasn't just noise to Rick's family. They believed her. Rick told me his mom had called him earlier that day, really upset, asking if he was okay and if he needed help. Apparently, she thought I had him trapped or something. And Rick's siblings? They were all blowing up his phone, saying things like, "We're worried about you, and why is she involved in your money?" It was ridiculous. None of them had ever even asked about our finances before. But suddenly, they were all experts on how we should be handling things. Rick was frustrated, I could tell. And the worst part? He was frustrated with me, too. Not because I'd actually done anything wrong, but because he felt stuck between his family and me. He didn't want to choose sides, but it was clear that his family was pushing him to. And Jess? She was just sitting back, probably loving the fact that she'd stirred up so much chaos. I told Rick I wasn't going to engage with his family about it. If they wanted to believe Jess's lies, then that was on them. I wasn't about to sit down and explain my entire marriage to them just to clear my name. But Rick? He wasn't so sure. He wanted me to talk to them, to set the record straight. And I get it. I really do. He wanted peace, but I wasn't about to go groveling to his family for their approval, especially not when Jess was the one causing all this mess in the first place. We went back and forth on it for a while. Rick kept saying things like, if they just understood the situation, they wouldn't be upset, and this is all a misunderstanding. But I wasn't buying it. Jess wasn't just misunderstanding things. She was purposely twisting the truth to make me look bad. And Rick's family? They were choosing to believe her without even giving me a chance to explain. Eventually, Rick agreed to leave it alone for now, but I could tell he wasn't happy about it. And honestly, neither was I. It felt like this big cloud hanging over us, just waiting to burst open at the worst possible moment. A couple of days later, Rick had to go out of town for work. Nothing too long, just a weekend trip, but it couldn't have come at a worse time. I was still fuming about the whole family situation, and now I had to deal with it alone while he was away. But whatever, I figured I'd just lay low and hope the weekend passed without any more drama. Of course, that didn't happen. The day Rick left, Jess showed up at the house. I didn't even know she was coming. One minute, I'm minding my own business, and the next, there she is, knocking on the door like she's here for some friendly chat. I opened the door, and she just walked right in like she owned the place. No hello, no nothing. She wasted no time either. The second she sat down, she went right into it. "We need to talk about my dad," she said, like she was about to drop some life-altering news. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting to see what new nonsense she was about to throw at me. She started going on about how Rick had never been the same since we got married, how he used to be more involved in the family before I came along, and how now everything was about me and my needs. And then she dropped the real kicker. "I think you need to step back and let him reconnect with his family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Step back? From what? From my own marriage? It was like she thought I was some kind of invader in her dad's life. And if I just disappeared, everything would magically go back to the way it was before. I didn't lose my temper this time, though. I stayed calm, because I knew that's exactly what she wanted, for me to blow up and give her more ammunition. Instead, I told her, "Look, I'm not going anywhere. Your dad and I are married, and we're a team. If you don't like that, that's your problem, not mine." She didn't like that. At all. Jess stood up and gave me this look like she was about to say something else, but instead she just turned and walked out of the house without another word. And honestly, I was glad she left, because I was about 5 seconds away from losing it. When Rick came back from his trip, I told him what had happened, and he just sighed like he was completely worn down by the whole thing. He didn't even seem surprised anymore, just tired. And to be fair, so was I. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I'd tried everything to keep the peace, to be civil, to give Jess and Blake the space they needed to adjust to our marriage. But it didn't matter. No matter what I did, they were always going to see me as the bad guy. Rick and I had a long talk that night, and I told him how frustrated I was with the whole situation. I wasn't asking him to pick sides, but I needed him to back me up more. I couldn't keep fighting this battle on my own while he stayed neutral. It wasn't fair to either of us, and to his credit, Rick agreed. He told me he was going to have another conversation with Jess, and this time, he wasn't going to hold back. He was going to make it clear that this behavior had to stop, or there were going to be consequences. I didn't know if it would work, but at least it was a start. At least Rick was finally seeing things from my side. Update 2. After that conversation with Rick, I thought things might actually start to change. I really did. I figured maybe, just maybe, he'd talk to Jess, lay down some boundaries, and we could finally get some peace. But of course, things didn't go the way I hoped. They never do they? A couple of days later, Rick sat down with Jess to have the talk. He'd told me he was going to be firm, that he wasn't going to let her walk all over us anymore. And honestly, I believed him. Rick's a good guy, but I knew this whole situation was wearing him down. He'd always tried to stay neutral, but at some point, you've got to take a stand, right? Well, after their talk, Rick came home and told me that things had gone okay. And I'll admit, I wasn't exactly thrilled with the word okay. When I pressed him for more details, he just said Jess seemed to understand that she needed to back off, but she didn't really apologize for anything. I could tell he didn't want to get into it too much, so I let it go, for the moment at least. I figured we'd see how things played out. A week passed, and there was no word from Jess or Blake. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but honestly, the silence was nice for once. It felt like we were finally getting some breathing room. Rick and I even started to have some normal conversations again, without everything being about the kids and their drama. I started to think maybe this was the calm after the storm. But then, Jess called. Now, when I saw her name pop up on Rick's phone, I had that sinking feeling in my stomach like, here we go again. Rick answered, and I could hear Jess's voice on the other end, even though I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Okay, maybe I was a little. She wasn't yelling or anything, but the tone, it wasn't friendly. Rick kept saying things like, "We already talked about this," and "I thought we were past that." So I knew right away that this wasn't going to be a good conversation. I walked out of the room to give him some space, but I could feel the tension building. When he finally hung up, I asked him what happened, and the look on his face said it all. Apparently, Jess had decided that our last conversation wasn't enough for her. She told Rick that she still felt uncomfortable with me being involved in his finances, and that she wanted to have a meeting with both of us, like a formal sit-down, to discuss it. A meeting? I mean, are we running a business here, or are we just trying to live our lives? Rick looked exhausted, and honestly, so was I. I didn't want to have some kind of intervention with Jess where she'd just twist everything I said and make me out to be the bad guy again. But Rick, being Rick, thought maybe this could be a way to clear the air once and for all. He thought if we could all sit down and talk it out like adults, maybe things would finally get better. I wasn't convinced, but I agreed. What else was I going to do? It's not like we could avoid her forever. So we set up a time to meet at a neutral place, some diner where Rick and I used to go on weekends. I guess the idea was that it wouldn't feel so confrontational if we weren't sitting in our house with all the baggage that comes with it. The day of the meeting rolls around and I'm dreading it. Rick and I get there first, and I can tell he's nervous too. He's tapping his foot under the table, and every time the door opens, he glances over to see if it's Jess. I'm just sitting there trying to mentally prepare for what I know is going to be a train wreck. Jess finally shows up, and to her credit, she's calm. No yelling, no accusations. At least not right away. She sits down and we all order coffee like we're about to have some normal, pleasant conversation. But the second the waitress leaves, Jess dives right into it. I'm still not comfortable with the way things are, she says, not even bothering with any kind of small talk. I don't understand why you're letting her, she gestured at me, have control over everything. I wasn't going to let that slide, so I jumped in. I don't have control over everything, Jess. Your dad and I make decisions together. As a married couple, that's how it works. But she wasn't hearing it. It just feels like you've taken over his life. He used to be so independent, and now it's like he's different. The way she said different made it sound like I'd somehow brainwashed Rick into doing whatever I wanted, which honestly was insane. Rick tried to step in and defend me, but Jess wasn't listening. She kept going on about how things were better before I came into the picture, how Rick was more involved with the family, how she just wanted things to go back to how they were. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about control or finances or any of the stuff she'd been saying. Jess just didn't want me in the picture at all. I sat there trying to stay calm while she unloaded all this on us, but it was getting harder and harder. She wasn't just upset about how things were now. She was blaming me for everything that had changed since her mom passed. She wanted the old version of her dad back, the one who was struggling but still theirs, not the version who had moved on and built a new life with me. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to replace anyone, that I loved Rick and just wanted to support him. But Jess wasn't having it. She kept pushing, and at one point she even said, "Maybe you should take a step back and let Dad figure things out on his own for a while." That was it. That was my breaking point. "I'm not stepping back from my marriage, Jess," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Your dad and I are partners. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like an outsider just because you don't like that he's moved on." Rick looked at me, then at Jess, and I could see he was torn. But he didn't say anything. He just sat there, letting the silence hang between us. Jess finally stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "Well, I guess we're done here then." And just like that, she walked out. Rick and I sat there in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing what had just happened. It wasn't the resolution he'd been hoping for, but at least it was clear where we all stood. On the way home, Rick finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't realize how much this was hurting you." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We both knew things were far from over, but at least for now, the lines had been drawn, and I was done backing down.